Hi, Davi here, and today we have a new episode in the Art of Davi YouTube channel or Davi channel. And today we'll be checking out this comment right here by Move.io or IQ.io or I0 or 10. The comment is, I have no idea how to translate abstract shapes into a coherent design. All I get are more abstract shapes. And I do understand what you're trying to say, but I think you kind of have the answer right here. It's the shapes. Like, you start out with a shape and end up with a shape. I mean, there's something missing here, right? So obviously the thing you actually have to change, it's just one step or one kind of shift, and that's to translate shape into form, right? And once you have form, you can actually get some kind of design. So this whole thing is an entire process itself, but I think we need to focus more on this guy over here, and then maybe we can do a video on how to make our forms more design-ish, meaning it's understandable, people know what it means, people get it, and there's more of a purpose or function behind the thing. But so again, this is an entire process in itself. So we'll call this P1 or P2, process 2. What we're going to focus on today is process number 1, and that's turning shape into form. And I think this is the gist of what I'm going to be doing a demo of in today. So remember, you talked about how you don't have an idea how to translate the shapes you're making into some kind of design. So before you go to the design part, I think we should focus more on creating form. So how do you make a shape into some kind of form? So let's say you're doing a bunch of random, let me use a different brush here, something more big. So let's say you're doing a bunch of random shapes, right? Now obviously if I keep going, nothing will come out of this session. So you can either start with some kind of shape with a graphic brush, or you can start with impressions. So what I'm doing right now, it's kind of like a shape, but they're more like blobs or impressions of something, right? So the secret to turning a shape into a form is to make it 3D. So what you want to do to make something 3D is to render or shade, right? So we'll use this guy for example. Now right now it looks like nothing, but if I shade this thing, you'll see how it can become form for some kind of form. And again, let's not jump into the design element right now, because I think that's something that you're trying to, it's too far away for now. So what we want to do is to learn how to turn shapes into forms, so that once we have the forms, we can manipulate it even more into something that's a bit more recognizable, right? So right now we need to make it into some kind of organic or mechanical, maybe I'm saying it wrong. We need to turn it into some kind of object. It can't just remain some kind of shape. Right now we'll use this, what we have now, even if it looks weird, even if it looks kind of ugly and messy, what we can do, let me just play something in the background, because anyway, you probably can hear it, but so let's just take this maybe gray or this lighter gray thing or value, and let's start doing this. Now again, right now we're not trying to make something recognizable just yet in terms of design. We're trying to make the blobs we had and make it into some kind of form, and I think that's the missing step in your issue over here. So now it looks kind of ugly, messy, but if we just, let me find a different brush, or fuck it, we'll use the same brush or this. Let me just zoom out a bit. It helps too if you're kind of zoomed out, because you can see the bigger picture and you're kind of seeing it or treating it as more of a thumbnail. So there's going to be less pressure, and obviously you will have a bigger picture kind of view. So to make a shape into a form, you have to shade. So I've tried to find and indicate some dark areas. Try to randomize it for now, because if you're new to this thing, you don't have to worry about the function. You need to focus more on the form. Remember, you already have a series of shapes, and that's good, so that's a plus for you. The missing thing here is the form, because that form is going to lead eventually to your design, right? So don't worry so much about the design aspect for now. Focus on creating forms. You already have the shapes. So now you want to create form, and you do that via shading. So you can see me just kind of picking in light areas and dark areas. And I think that's the first thing that's going to indicate some kind of form. Right? So right now what we can do is, again, let's focus on just the grayscale or black and white. And then we'll try to delete, or there's a bit of an edge here, so we'll use some more basic brush, a basic round brush, and we'll do this, right? Now you could use the erase tool, but I'd rather just paint the white in. And that's kind of how I erase. So again, to create form, the first thing is to put in the darks and the lights, right? Again, randomize it, don't think too much about it. And once you have that, you do some blending. You could either use a mixer brush, or you could just do like the classic shading thing where the intensity of the color depends on the pressure of your pen. That's kind of what I'm going to do here, right? And the aim here again is to create form, not design just yet. I know that's eventually what you want to head to, but you can't skip to that part if you don't even know how to create form just yet. And I do this a lot, where I just make a bunch of blobs and then I render them out. I'm not trying to create anything, and I'm sort of just letting my pen take charge, right? So you can see me play. It's all this type of phase is more about playing with values, because value is what's going to create the 3D aspect, which is basically form, right? So remember, you can skip back and see the initial blobs we did, and look at how blobby and unserious or undefined it is. But just by rendering something in this way, you do end up with something a bit more, even though it's not like a functional thing, it's something. You can always build upon it, manipulate it, paint over it. And I think that's what you want to eventually get to, because once you're good at manipulating forms, design is easy. Design, technically by this phase in turning form to design, it's more about information. You will need like a bunch of references for this phase. You will need more like details, so it's not really, it's a whole different step. And again, we can do a video on that, but right now, your job, I guess, if you're trying to work on your if you want to leave that phase of just shapes, random shapes, abstract shapes, turn those shapes into forms. And then once you're there, then, or once you're comfortable, with that, then we can level up. So don't try to do too many things at once. And learn to just learn your shading, practice your shading, whether it's adding some lights or adding some darks, and make sure you do it in grayscale. Don't focus on color for now. And I do think in color, when you're using color, it's more of a design thing, right? Like it's very secondary to values. So when it comes to the initial sketch, let me just erase some shit here. Let me put this guy above, There you go. So this comment here is above everything else. Now look at that. If you zoom out, it looks like a mech of some kind, right? Now does it? Does it? It really also depends on your visual library, like what you've seen, what you know. And I guess it's more of the form to design stage, perhaps. Because if you can't find shapes or some kind of form within the random shapes you've made, then I think you're just not observing things enough. You know, in my last video, my last art process video, you'll notice me kind of subconsciously go for some kind of head design or some kind of kaiju Evangelion head design, and the reason why is because that's what I usually pay attention to. So eventually that's what I'm going to see whenever I make a bunch of blobs, and it's going to be those kinds of forms. And by the way, as you do this, you will realize that you're also going to develop your style, specifically your design style when it comes to your forms. Because notice artists, whether they're 2D, 3D, not only do they have like a visual style, like the actual end result, but they have a 3D style, or sorry, a form style where they tend to go for certain forms. For example, some people, artists, are a bit more like a blobby and circular. For example, Feng Zhu tends to be very insecty with his work. Whenever he does his vehicles or environments, there's like an insect vibe to it. Just look at how their legs move and how their anatomy kind of is shaped. And the reason why his environments and vehicles, even his characters sometimes, like human characters or humanoid characters, the reason why they look that way is because he has, like, his visual library is filled with that stuff. So when you notice him making blobs on the page, it tends to be just very insect-ish, you know? So I think it's a great thing to learn before going deep and really defining things with details and more specific things, right? So once you develop the skill, or once you're somewhat good at this, then you can level up and focus on being a bit more detailed and focusing more on functionality when it comes to your design. Like, is it part of your story? Is it part of whatever the design or narrative needs are? I think this is where it's going to happen. But right now, since your issue is not being able to leave the shapes or the abstract shapes, then you need to focus more on practicing this skill, and that's creating form out of shape or out of the abstractions, right? Let me just have some water here. So this is kind of what you want to do. If you zoom out, it does look like something. I think it's some kind of mech, or it could be. Or it could even be some kind of environment if you kind of flip it. Maybe some flying mountains or something, buildings. Some organic looking buildings, but look at how we were able to find something, right? So what you want to do or find, let me just write it down because I feel like I'm not recording things properly. Or your form style, right? Basically it's the things or the shapes, the forms you typically gravitate to, you naturally gravitate towards to. And by doing this kind of practice, by turning shape to form via rendering or shading via values, meaning grayscale. I mean, there are values in colors as well, but you have to desaturate the color so you can actually see the values even more, and you do that via grayscale. So we'll say gray scale. Get it, right? So this is what to do. This is what I want you to focus more on. It's this part right here. So the secret to your answer, or the answer to your question, the secret to your answer, is learning how to play with values, which is basically just rendering and shading, which will create the forms which will eventually lead to your, the promised land, and that's design, right? So let's do things step by step and enjoy as we go. Now, another tip, I guess, is to add some symmetry. For example, because this shape right here is the way it is, I decided to kind of paint over this side and kind of balance this two out, or make it somewhat the same, right? So learn to get learn to get comfortable with just painting over your previous stuff. And this is part of the practice of playing with your values, and yeah. So I think you already have the first skill. We'll call the first skill Abstraction. Shape. Let me just, because everything is kind of messy, let me pick a different pen. Let's try and formalize this. We'll try this guy. Shit. I think the first thing you have is shape. Let me just zoom out, hit L for the lasso tool, and then we'll select all of this and make this smaller. Whoa! Because it's taking up the whole page. There you go. So number one is going to be shape abstraction. And I think that's what you're doing, or that's what you say, or you've said you've done. Can I spell? Ugh, come on. Sorry. Abstraction. You've got that down, that's good. Number two, which we're focusing on today, is form creation. And I think that's the missing link in a way to your eventual design. We'll call it design invention. Ooh, everything rhymes, right? Ugh. There you go. So eventually this is where you want to lead to, or where the end result basically. But before you can go here, you need this freaking guy, okay? So yeah. So hopefully you get the gist of what I'm saying. Let's do one more, and to kind of solidify things even more. Let's zoom out a bit. Let's find the same. Let's just work on the first one a bit more. So this one is dark, right? So then we can do that. So now we have like a kind of mecha. Maybe this is some kind of rocket or ammo kind of thing. We have the legs over here. We have some kind of arms, but they're more like cannons. And maybe this is some kind of cockpit. So it eventually kind of opens. Shit, we're kind of doing design now, so I'm kind of making. I'm going ahead too much. But eventually, as you develop the forms more and randomize, again, it's okay to randomize it. Eventually, things will just naturally come up. And again, visual library matters. So you do need to be a bit more observant and, download references of your favorite stuff or things that interest you. And it's okay if you don't think, if it's a bit wide. Eventually, once you put your pen to paper or the canvas, there are certain forms that you will naturally gravitate to. And sometimes it's not always because of your visual library, it's because of your hand. Like, think of how sometimes you, like your signature, like people can write, like you can write your name in all sorts of ways, but I think a signature is a good example of how it's just something that fits your hand. Like maybe signature is a bit too specific, like your handwriting basically. Like we can all write the same sentences, but because of our the anatomy of our hands, our habits, etc., our words tend to look a certain way when we write our words. And even the tools we have, for example, writing with this round brush is very different from writing with my pen, which I did over here, right? So all of that will eventually mash up together and inform your handwriting. And this applies to your forms as well. Just, you need to be able to spend time on your canvas or on your sheet of paper or whatever your program is. So we'll do another example, kind of like this one. This is example number 1. We'll do example number 2. So this whole thing is about shapes to form. Shapes to form. Step 1 to step 2, right? Step 1 to step 2. So this is the process number 1, or shape to form. So far it has been 21 minutes, so I think we can cap in 30. Since this is a tutorial, it makes sense that it would be kind of long. So should we use a different brush? You know what, fuck it, let's use a basic round brush, because sometimes people assume that you need a certain brush to be able to make something, and that's not true. So again, random shapes, right? Random blobs, random impressions. Randomize it, it's fine. How do you make this into something? I think we mentioned it before. Shading. And when you're shading, by the way, let's add another element here, and that's adding subtracting. Subtract. Fuck. So we'll use this. We'll use this guy and make something out of it. Right now, we'll pick a lighter color, and then we'll start shading this way. Again, we're filling in the white areas within most of these blobs. No, it doesn't look like much, but we can play around. Let's pick a darker value and randomize it even more. And you just want to find, when you're doing this kind of thing, you want to find what looks interesting, what kind of looks visually appealing, and you want to use your abstract shapes if you're already kind of good with abstract shape making, because there are certain abstract art pieces that look good. I know it's kind of like a modern art, like this is a negative connotation to modern art, but there are certain abstract pieces, paintings, that they just look good, visually good, because there's some kind of balance being done, and you want to apply that kind of thing in this phase. So you did see me kind of subtract something, and by painting in the whites, now I'm picking a gray value here. To focus on the 3 main stuff, there's basically a dark value, a dark, a mid, and a light. If you're trying to work on your forms and do this sort of thing, try playing around with these sorts of elements. These basic 3. Start with black and white if it's too hard, but eventually that's going to become more of a shape thing, and it's hard to really see the forms that way. So eventually try to expand it or do these 3 a bit more. So we'll add some darks here. I feel like it needs to extend further out. Now you'll notice I do like extending things, like, or elongating things sometimes. And I'm not sure why, but it just looks good. Like visually, it just looks good. So in terms of shape, it looks nice, right? So if you're doing your abstract practice, abstract shape stuff, well, you'll know what kind of looks visually or what shapes look kind of good. So once you have a good looking shape, then you can start rendering it. So shit, let me just add that as well. Before you can skip to the form thing, right here, let's do this. Your shapes need to already look kind of good. Shapes that look good. Even if there's nothing in it, like there's no, it's not a person, it's not a mech or some kind of environment. It's just like a random shape. If it looks visually appealing, just look at any kind of graphic design kind of book, or just look at magazines, like the way they organize like this type of text, or like really big text and stuff like that, typography and stuff like that. Look at how it just looks visually appealing, and you want to make sure that your shapes, before going into form, they look good, because once you have those shapes, then you can start adding value, shading, cutting. Oh shit, I think the adding and subtracting part is more of a shape thing, I guess. It's more of a shape thing. Shape. So right now it looks kind of interesting, so let's kind of render it. Fuck, it's 26 minutes. I spent so much time talking, so we'll use a mixer brush. Where is it? Sometimes I don't, or I forget to properly name my brushes, so it ends up kind of scattered. Let's blend things here. Oh shit, look at that. Even if it's messy, it's okay. There you go. See? When you're doing this, again, grayscale, there's dark, there's mid, there's light. And just sketch away, or paint away, or render away, or shade away. And whenever you're doing these sorts of things, a lot of these will end up not being anything, like it won't be as interesting as you thought it would be. And it happens when you're doing this process, because since you're not creating something in general, or specific rather, obviously it's going to end up being random. And when you're doing something random, your results are going to be random as well. So don't expect to do this and you'll eventually like come up with some kind of iconic design for your IP or whatever. Or maybe you'll find some kind of character design, whatever, or stuff like that. I do like the dark part here. I'm not sure what it is, but this one seems like it's taking so much space. We'll delete that. Right? And play with the values. Your main thing here is playing with the values. See? Look at how the values are kind of, there's a gradation of values from dark to light. We'll try using a different brush, a round brush still, but something a bit more blendy. Is that the word? There. Where it's easy to kind of render, and it has a bit more opacity in it. Now, am I trying to create something specific? Not really. I'm just trying to render it out and add some form to my shapes. I did some of it here with a mixer brush. So let's now I think this will look even better if you have like a nice brush. But I'm showing you how you can do this with a basic round brush. Now this one, it's still a round brush, but the opacity is a bit low. So it's perfect for kind of blending vice strokes. It's not one big stroke, you have to go back and forth and essentially shade in, whether it's light, dark, whatever. You have to kind of do that back and forth thing to be able to make that form. I do like the black here, so we'll leave that in. Maybe it's some kind of hole or something. And I think it's 29 minutes. You also want to play with your edges, I guess, because eventually if you're working with shapes and trying to render them out, you need to know where something begins and where something ends. So this practice can help you learn a lot about your edge control, like how you personally will play with edges. Right? Again, don't try to overthink it. Just be random about it, and don't forget this practice. Every time you do this, you're actually going to get better, because every time you look at something new, it's going to eventually come out in your in this kind of scribble doodle session, right? Remember how this thing was kind of so blobby in the beginning, right? And now it's some kind of like a monster or whatever. Is it? So if you zoom in right here, just take this dark part and blend it out into the gray. And just by doing that, you have some kind of form. Does it make sense? Not always. But again, the secret here is to learn how to play with your forms. Turn shapes into forms and learning to manipulate those forms via playing with these things, the darks, the mids, the lights, and also the edges. So it's two things, I guess. You're playing with the values and you're playing with the edges. So these are the two major things, I guess, that you have to work on when you're doing this sort of thing. And it's super fun because you're not exactly doing anything specific. It's sort of like a random session where you just do whatever, right? Now this only really works if beforehand you're good at you're good at shit. You're good at this shape abstraction and your shapes actually look good. If you're having issue with this, then you need to go back to your fundamentals, composition and stuff like that. The 7 main or principles of art, there's line, there's texture, etc., etc. Rule of thirds, stuff like that. If you don't have a good set of or a good understanding of those fundamentals, I think you're going to have a hard time creating interesting shapes. So right now, I think all of this is just rendering and shading, or we'll just say rendering in grayscale, and we're playing with values because we're dealing with forms, right? We're playing with two things. Under grayscale, under black and white, we're playing with values and we're playing with values and we're playing with edges. Oh, reminds me of the art of Entei Ryu or Entei Ryu something. I'll link her work in the description below, but she does a lot of these iPad sketches, and if you can do that kind of thing, I think designing is going to be easy for you. Now, yes, there are more steps in design because you have to do some research, stuff like that. But yeah, so we'll pick this lighter value here, and we'll add it here, right? And maybe even here, and then we'll blend it out. So we'll pick the edge and blend it out like that. See? It makes the edge look a bit more sharper, right? Look at that. I think we're losing it a bit more, shit. Something lighter. Shit. Lighter. We can even make the brush even smaller. Again, we're only using a round brush. So I think, it's been 34 minutes, so we're going to have to stop this video because we're taking too long, but you get the point. Right? Clean the edge a bit. There you go, just do that. Oh shit, look at that. Not a bad... It's some kind of alien perhaps. And now for me, you will notice that my forms tend to be a bit more organic. and they tend to look like crustaceans of some kind. And I don't really have a particular, I mean, I like shrimp, prawns, lobsters, crabs. So maybe that's it, but it's not just that. It's because my hand also moves a certain way. I do like making like, I do like making kind of like really curvy, organic, these types of movements. Like it's going to be circular and then long in something else. But that's more of a shape thing, more of a shape abstraction kind of thing. So right now, we're focusing again on form creation. So practice this guy over here. And I think this is the next thing you're going to have to work on if you want to leave, your shape abstraction. That's good. There's no shame in this. This is an important step. You can't make shit if you don't even have like shapes to begin with or blobs. And if you want to stop with the abstract shapes and just leave it or go beyond it, above it, think of abstract shapes or what you're doing as the foundation. These two things over here, they would not be where they are if I did not make those initial shapes or blobs, right? Once you play around with the shapes, eventually you'll start, playing with the values right here and playing with the edges via shading and rendering. And that's eventually where you're going to naturally spawn your forms, right? So once you have that, then we can move on to the next thing. But right now, I do recommend just focusing more on your form creation. So if you want to leave your shape abstraction over here, go to step 2 and focus on your form creation. So hopefully, I've helped you in some way with this tutorial. And I'll see you in the next video. Bye.